I'm sure you tell people the same thing. Just don't use the same passwords for multiple websites and make sure your passwords are long and complicated. Maybe use a password manager to store those securely versus, just writing down a piece of paper or storing them in the notes on your phone.
You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello, Nathan Whitaker here, CEO of Stimulus Technologies, and welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. Today we're joined by Adam Dawson, CFP, the owner and CEO of Capstone Capital Wealth Advisors. Over the past 25 years, Adam has helped hundreds of business owners plan their financial future, protect what they've built, and invest with confidence. He's a three-time author, and his latest book is entitled Life Beyond Your Business: When to Sell and What Comes Next. Adam also serves in several leadership roles here in Southern Nevada, including the Alliance of Merger and Acquisition Advisors. On a personal note, Adam is a singer, pianist, composer, husband, father, and by his own admission, a one-time triathlete who would do more triathlons if swimming with a life jacket were allowed. And excited to have you on. You're been a customer of ours too, and we're really excited to have clients on to talk about their businesses and what they do. So,
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm excited to hear, a little bit about your background and the book, and we have a lot of business owners on here. So, I think there's a bit of a market here that business owners are always wondering, when is the time for me to sell our business? When's the time to exit? And, what should a business owner know before they decide to sell or exit their business?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Nathan. And now more than 25 years being in wealth management, we kind of fell into this specific service, if you will. We've had several business owner clients over the years come to us saying, hey, I got this incredible offer to buy my business, not really sure whether I should sell or not. Can you help me vet offers and build a financial plan to figure out how much money do I really need to retire? Is this offer enough? Am I going to really have enough to live the lifestyle that I want the rest of my life if I stop working right now? In the beginning, we were like, well, we're not experts on this, but they said, well, yep, but you understand our whole financial picture, everything we're trying to accomplish. So we really appreciate your expertise. And since we had so many of our business owner clients coming to us with those questions, we decided to really lean into this because we really enjoy that part of it. I would say just a sounding board for one of the most important financial decisions and life decisions of a business owner's life. And so we, have studied a ton about this over the years to be a better resource for these clients. And then just now, hot off the press as we're speaking, this new book coming out, Life Beyond Your Business: What to Sell and What Comes Next. And so it's really just digging into what are the things that business owners need to be thinking about on the front end of those decisions. It makes me really sad when I hear a business owner goes through the whole process and they get to the signing table, so to speak, and they just can't cross the finish line because it's just too scary. They're saying, well, I don't really know if this is going to be enough money. Or even bigger question I think people have is, who am I going to be? What am I going to do with my time if I'm not working anymore? What's my new identity? That's just too frightening of a decision to make unless you've done some work ahead of time to think through those things. So that's what this book is really about. And that's what our services focus on. It is a big part of, how much is your business really worth? What are you really going to net after the sale, after taxes and fees and paying off debts and all those kind of things? Sometimes people are surprised. They see this really big number that they get offered, but then after due diligence, the buyer's job is to try to make the business look like it's worth less than what it really is, finding all these quote unquote problems, skeletons in the closets and things. So we just wanted to have a more realistic idea of what they're really going to net, how much they're really going to net after all those things before they enter that process. And then that next question is, once you know what that number is, then combining that with your other assets, other things going on, maybe Social Security, pensions, all that kind of stuff, is that enough to live the lifestyle that you want the rest of your life? And then, as I mentioned, that third piece, how are you going to spend your time? How are you going to find meaning and purpose? So the book is built in three parts: your exit plan, your financial plan, and your life plan.
Really interesting. I've talked to a number of consultants and different people that have come in and spoken about this to my different business groups. And I think the average time that they recommend to start thinking about this is 5 years, even before they start trying to sell their business? Is that kind of the perspective you have? Is it is a longer term time frame. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to sell my business tomorrow. It's really takes a while to prepare for it, both mentally and the business aspects of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. 5 years is a good target. I mean, there's no right or wrong. There are some people who are forced to sell because of health issues or they suddenly have a change. I'm burned out, or maybe they have some new challenges in their industry due to increased competition or new government regulations. There's so many things that can change our paths without much notice. So if you have to sell right away, that's fine too. We're here to help people make the most of it and work through that. But yeah, the more time you have to plan, the better. 5 years, 10 years. I actually think that we all should be thinking about preparing our businesses for a sale all the time because, well, we call them the 5 Ds. There are five unexpected ways that you could be forced to exit your business. That's distress, disagreement with partner, divorce, disability, and death are kind of those 5 Ds that we need to always be prepared for.
That's interesting. We've done a couple of acquisitions, and all of them involve one of those Ds at some point.
Oh,
There's
that's interesting.
one of them was either a retirement by a family member or death. We acquired a business at a sudden death of the owner, and the family
Mm.
took over, and there was some disagreement. So there was a couple of Ds in there, and we were able to acquire the business. But yeah, it's definitely, those are unexpected things. So you're saying that we should always be somewhat prepared to exit rather than waiting for one of those things to come along, or just to decide to exit. We should be kind of running our business as if we need to do it tomorrow.
That's right. Yeah, and the other benefit to running your business as if you were preparing it for a sale is all the things that you do to prepare for a sale just make your business more profitable and easier to run too.
Beyond just, sales and revenue, what kind of things do you have to worry about as a business owner to make it profitable?
Yeah, it's funny. So many business owners are very driven and just have all these really great qualities of vision and work ethic and commitment to excellence when it comes to creating an amazing product or service, customer experience. These are all definitely things that drive me, get me up in the morning. I'm always excited to make our company better and provide a better experience for our clients. But kind of without realizing it, what a lot of business owners can do is they don't realize how much the business has become dependent on them as a person, their vision, their work ethic. They're always fixing all the problems because as business owners, we're just problem solvers by nature. It's something we enjoy doing. It's something we're good at. But if you're not careful as a business owner, then you can make the business too dependent on just that one person for its continued success. Nobody wants to buy a business that is dependent on the owner for its success because then it's too big of a risk. Will the customers stay? Will the employees stay? Will the vendors keep working with the business if the owner's not there? How will the business continue to grow? Those types of things. So it's even though a lot of business owners can be very successful by their own drive, that's a very fragile business too, because any little thing that happens, whether it be health wise or burnout, those types of things, heaven forbid that they take a vacation, that business needs to be able to continue on. So I actually wrote an article about this a little while ago. The title was something like "How Laziness Can Help Your Business Become More Profitable and More Valuable" as well. This is something I'm actually testing right now. Is just how do I, if I take a week or two off, from the business, what are the holes that I discover? We actually have a really great team, and so far, even taking a couple weeks off, we haven't had any issues, which has been really a great testament to our team. But could you take a month off? Could you take 3 months off? Those are really great tests to see how the business would do without the owner's involvement. And the less the owner has to be involved, the more profitable the business is going to be. So that's what I mean. Well, sorry, the more valuable the business is going to be is what I mean for when it comes time for sale. So you can see how even if you're not planning to sell for another 10 years, 20 years, if you can make the business less dependent on you as an owner, then you just have a much better life too. And then you're working because you want to, not because you have to.
It's interesting. I think it's counterintuitive because as business owners, especially entrepreneurs, founder-led companies, you want the business to be dependent on you because it always has. It's your baby, right? But I
Well, it
just
definitely
remember,
feeds your ego,
yeah,
like, "Oh, nobody can do this without me."
yeah. One of the scariest times in our business was 8 years ago. I decided to go on a 2 week solo backpacking trip, and I was completely away from technology. Nobody could contact me for 2 weeks. What was interesting thing about it is in the preparation for that trip, we had to solve a lot of those holes and problems so that I could be gone for 2 weeks without any communication and the business not be harmed by it. And it made the company a lot better. And so now it's been kind of an annual thing that I'll go away for a couple of weeks or at least a week and just make sure the business can operate. As a business owner is thinking about it, how do they know how much they need to sell the business for? I think that's a scary thing because if you're 50 years old versus 70 years old, selling the business, I'm sure that the dollar amount changes a lot depending on how long you plan on being away from it. And I don't think many business owners feel like they could be good employees,
Yeah.
go work for somebody else after they've run a business for, 10, 20, 30 or more years. How does a person know how much they should sell the company for and plan for that long-term retirement?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and you'd be surprised how many people just ask us point blank, "How much money do I need?" before we even know that much about them, and it's a different number for everybody. Some of our clients would be fine, totally fine living on 5 or 10,000 a month, and other clients say they can't live on less than 100,000 a month. So there's a pretty wide range there. And so I think the biggest mistake that business owners make is they assume that they'll be able to generate the same cash flow from an investment that they were able to take from their business based on what the value is. And so just give you an idea, let's say somebody has a net income of 20% at the end of the day. So they pay themselves a salary plus, 20% profits from the business. That's a really healthy income that I can almost guarantee you would not be able to find in any other investment, at least the way we do it, well diversified, trying to minimize risk, that kind of thing. So maybe you could earn that much in a year or two every once in a while, but it's not going to be consistently reliable. And so that's a big part of what we need to do is educate business owners on how much is a realistic rate of return you can expect in a diversified portfolio, mix of stocks, bonds, maybe you have some real estate in there, those types of things. Our approach is pretty conservative. We take pride in being some of the most boring investment advisors you'll ever meet. But that's because most of our clients have already made their money in their business, and we're very clear. We tell them there's no investment we can show you where you're going to earn a higher return for the risk that you're taking than you can earn in your own business. It's just a question of if you're not wanting to work in it anymore, you're getting burned out, you don't want to take the risks anymore. You just want to relax and enjoy life or focus on some other things, maybe some nonprofit, volunteer work, things like that. So we obviously have some great financial planning software that shows them based on reasonable assumptions for how long they might live, what might inflation be, taxes, rates of return on those investments, all those types of things. How much is it going to take for them to live the life that they want? And they tell us what that budget looks like. And usually we have three different categories. It's like, okay, what are your essential expenses? Like, I absolutely have to have this amount. We can put some more guaranteed type investments in those buckets. And then you look at, all right, then these are the important things, the discretionary things. But most clients are actually pretty surprised. I think we get caught in this trap as business owners also of more and more and more. Like more is always better. So I'm just going to keep growing. But we have so many clients who die with millions of dollars. They end up leaving their heirs millions more than they ever anticipated. They don't really enjoy that wealth as much as they thought they might. And so we're trying to help them find that balance between, how much is enough, but then also not continually striving for more at the expense of health and relationships and fulfilling those dreams, all those things they've been putting off for their whole life to do.
That's interesting. I recently read the book Die with Zero, which kind of talks
Oh yeah,
about that.
great book. Yeah,
You get to a point that, you know, as a business owner, you might have more wealth than you would ever be able to spend in your lifetime, especially if you continue working, well into your 70s or 80s, whatever it may be. There's just different times of life, and it's better to find enjoyment, when you're able to, for health reasons or, for physical ability. And it's just that kind of an interesting thing to think about that, there'll be a time that, I see it with my parents and my in-laws that, it just gets harder and harder to do fun things, travel or, adventures or things when you're in your 80s or 70s. It's just not as easy. So
Totally. Yeah,
what about
and just one quick story about, there's a client we're working with right now who, before we met him, tried to sell his business, and over a year of negotiations back and forth and just so much, time and money, attorney's fees and accountant fees and trying to put this deal together, and he only had one buyer, didn't put it on the market. It was just somebody who kind of approached him as, great synergies between their 2 companies, and at the end of the day, he had the worst quarter he had had in 20 years right before they went to close. And so the buyer said, we're only going to pay you half of what we originally said that we were going to pay you, just because it looks like your business is struggling right now. And so he was very insulted and disappointed, obviously, and just said, forget it, forget the whole thing, walked away from the deal. He was just very frustrated, very almost maybe even depressed, because he was already counting on walking away. He was really burned out. He didn't want to work anymore. And so shortly after that, we met him. We put a financial plan together. We said, hey, maybe before you go to sell your business again, you should have a clear number in mind of how much you actually need from the business to live that lifestyle that you want. And after putting the plan together, wouldn't you know it, he could walk away from his business without a single penny and be totally fine because of other assets that he's built. He's done very well, paying off debts and saving and things. So just the look on his face was magical. It was amazing for us to see. Where you just felt this big burden lifted. He's almost like a different person now because he doesn't feel that stress of, oh, I don't have to sell my business. Now he still wants to, because he's saying, why not get something for it? Now he wishes that he had had that financial plan done before he tried selling it the first time, because now he has the clarity of knowing, okay, even though the final offer was less than what I originally thought it was going to be, if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken that deal and it would have been done already.
That's really interesting. I read an article that popped up in my feed this morning that, some of the assumptions we made in the market over the last 10, 20 years, growth market of like, 8 to 10% annual growth, and, the 4% rule in retirement of how much you can draw, and, that we should question all those assumptions that we made. And, there's just, you read different opinions. There's another book sitting on my desk that says, well, 4% rule is great, but we could probably do fine at 5% withdrawals and be okay. So when you work with clients, you build around custom assumptions that make sense for them. And do or is there hard, strict rules that you follow when you put these plans together?
Oh no, yeah, it's very customized, and I think that those 3% rule, 4%, 5%, whatever that number is, for those general rules, I think those can be helpful for people just to get a more realistic sense of how much might be, reasonable income in retirement to expect. We have clients that are taking 8% of their portfolio every year just because of their situation and what they're earning in their accounts, and maybe how much longer they have to live, those types of things. That's the right number for them. And so that's the value of having regular meetings with the advisor, whoever your advisor is. That way it can be customized from year to year. And if you have a really great year in the market, like these past few years have been incredible returns, why not spend a little more or take out a big chunk and take all your kids and grandkids to Africa for a month, or what, you know what I mean? There's so many cool things that you can do. You don't have to be constantly, oh, I'm only going to take out 4% per year, no matter what's happening in my life.
I guess one of the things we get contacted periodically by either business owners or high net worth individuals, concerned about cybersecurity, which is a big part of, what we do as a company. How do you feel that cybersecurity fits into wealth management today? What
Oh,
kind of
this is
people?
huge. Yeah, it's more important than ever. I think that, especially with AI, how AI has impacted cyber theft and all that kind of stuff with deep fakes, those types of things. Then cybersecurity is one of our biggest priorities, and that's one thing we really appreciate about working with you and your company, Nathan. You have done an incredible job of just making sure that all of our systems are secure and that all of our team members are up to date on all the latest developments in cybersecurity. I love the little mini team weekly trainings that you have for us are very helpful and entertaining. It's amazing how you can actually make the cybersecurity training a little bit entertaining. Yeah, this is something that maybe some people don't realize, but I'm of the opinion, and maybe you can refute me on this if it's not true, but I believe you're way more likely to lose money to some type of a fraud, or cyber incident than you are to have somebody just break in your house and steal something out of your safe.
I agree 100% with that. I mean, it's something we still have to be concerned about, physical security, but yeah, the concept of wire fraud is really the new like robber barons, train robber barons from 200 years ago. They're coming in and holding us as ransom, and maybe it is ransomware that they take you, but it's really very destructive, these things that can happen. So if a business has a cyber incident as they were, planning on selling, or if I'm sure it's something they should have to disclose as part of due diligence. How does that affect the valuation of a business that's trying to sell if they've had a cyber incident?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that there's huge potential to devastate the value of a business. So you just think about what is the cost of customers' information being stolen, or how does that impact the trust in that business moving forward, or losing customers? What is that, or even just siphoning all the cash of the business? That a lot of times that's a huge part of negotiations for a business transaction is working capital. Does this business have the cash flow and cash reserves to sustain itself, to continue to meet operational expenses? And then I think just the reputation of the company. Is this a company that people can trust going forward? What types of other maybe proprietary data has been stolen by cyber criminals? So obviously much easier to put those protections in place on the front end than it is to try to recover from something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's preaching what we say all the time to our clients is just so important to protect your business, because I mean, I couldn't imagine the day walking in and seeing $100,000 or $1 million siphoned out of the business account because of, an employee doing something. And I'm sure, you deal with this too, because you're doing wealth advising for clients, moving money around, changing things. What should a business and personal, what kind of controls do you see should be put in place to ensure that there's not that type of fraud, the wire fraud or ACH fraud or these type of things? What kind of controls do you recommend putting in place?
Yeah, so for us, maybe our clients are annoyed by it sometimes, but we refuse to ever send them money unless we've had a verbal confirmation. We're calling the number that we know of on their account, and we know all of our clients very well, so we're able to recognize voices and typical phrases and things like that. And also, just kind of, does the purpose seem reasonable? Is this a typical amount that they would be taking out? Does what they're taking it for seem like something that would be within what we know about them? It's really important to us to know our clients and their personal situations and what their goals are and things like that. And so, but that verbal confirmation is huge. And then 99% of the time, we're only sending money to their checking account or savings account that we have linked, that they've authorized us to send the money to. So there's no question there. It's not like we're sending the money to any accounts that we control or anything like that. Um, Occasionally, we'll have maybe a client is closing on a real estate deal or something, and so they'll need us to wire money to a title company directly. So we do have the ability to do that, but in those cases, we're double checking, triple catching, checking the account numbers. We're doing verbal confirmations on those as well. The client is authorizing those personally, in addition to before it can be sent by us. So we have all these checks and balances to make sure that the money is going to the right place. And thankfully, so far, we haven't had any issues of any money getting sent to the wrong place. Always a risk. It's something that we don't take lightly. We know that just because it's never happened doesn't mean it can't happen. And so we've also, when it comes to just personal protections outside of just dealing with a wealth advisor, And I'm sure you tell people the same thing. Just don't use the same passwords for multiple websites and make sure your passwords are long and complicated. Maybe use a password manager to store those securely versus, just writing down a piece of paper or storing them in the notes on your phone. Multi-factor authentication is huge. I think that's one of the biggest things to help protect from making sure you get that secondary verification of a text message on your phone or authenticator app, and then not sharing those passwords with other people. I think phishing scams are huge too. So we're always trying to tell clients, hey, if you think you're getting an email from us, if it doesn't seem quite right, just call us and make sure is this something that actually came from us. We use Charles Schwab as our custodian, so same thing. So I actually always love it when clients get emails from Schwab. We have yet to have one that wasn't legitimate, but I'm glad that our clients are skeptical. They're hey, I got this thing from DocuSign from Schwab. Is that really you guys to set up a new account or whatever that thing might be?
We should record that and post it over and over again. Well, we are recording, but because you just repeated exactly what we often tell our clients, those are the fundamentals for cybersecurity today and good cyber hygiene, because it's essential. And I think people take it in their business well today, but maybe a little bit lax on their personal side. And they're confusion like, oh, really, do I need to deal with multi-factor authentication on my social media accounts even, or different, maybe willing to do it on bank accounts but not on social media, or different random other websites. And what we found is hackers can get in through these innocuous websites like Facebook or Instagram or something like that, and then they can get into the rest of their systems one way or another through these back channels. And it is a little bit more time consuming, but is it worth a few seconds extra to log in versus hundreds of $1,000s lost out of your personal wealth? And I would say the few seconds is definitely worth the extra time.
Totally, I agree.
So as we wrap up here, what's one thing that a business owner should be working on this month to better protect their future and the future exit from their business?
That's a great question, Nathan. I think that probably the best way to look at it is if you were buying your company today, and if you were just an outside buyer and you're trying to vet, all right, is this something I really want to buy? What are those skeletons in the closet? What are the things that I would like to know, risks or kind of hidden issues that I need to be concerned about? Ask yourself those questions. What are the things that you might be concerned about as a potential buyer? We all have those skeletons in the closet, so to speak, or things that we want to improve about our business. Just decide what is the most important of those things today that might not be that desirable for a potential buyer, and then fix it. Just fix it now. And even if you're not planning to sell, like I said earlier, fixing those issues are going to make your business more profitable, more robust, less dependent on you as an owner, all of those types of things. And then when it does come time to sell, then it'll just make it that much more valuable in the eyes of a buyer, to where you get just the maximum dollar amount that you can, the best terms that you can, and the smoothest transition after the sale.
I really appreciate that, because I've had an advisor tell me multiple times is, wouldn't it be more interesting to run a business that you don't have to be there, enjoy, make money on, than be stressed out about your business all the time? So might as well fix it to be a sellable business, and then you may or may not sell it. It might be something that you continue on for another 10, 20 years and enjoy, but it will be a better business to run. So appreciate that advice. I think all of us as business owners should take that and find those skeletons and improve our businesses. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, how do they find you and how do they find your books?
Yes, absolutely. CapstoneCap.com is our website, Capstone Capital Wealth Advisors. And I actually have 3 books, but the book that's most relevant to this conversation is the latest book, Life Beyond Your Business, When to Sell and What Comes Next, available on Amazon, probably the easiest place to find that. So, and I will be recording an audiobook soon, but I just need a break right now.
It is a lot to write a book. So I get it. It was a journey to write ours, and it's a fun journey to help people with that. So appreciate you being on, and I hope that listeners got a little bit out of this to improve their business and take cybersecurity seriously, especially as they're in this day and age that there's so many threats out there. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it. And thank you for everything that you and your team do for us. It's been a great blessing to our company and our customers.
And thank you all for listening today, and hope you have a great week.